These dams in the Elan Valley supply water to the entirety of Birmingham and contain up to 100 billion litres of the stuff. They're in a state of full flow at the moment, which means that there's an awful lot of water in them. The flow of this water is totally gravity fed and takes around 2 days to reach Birmingham, where it's treated to ensure it's safe to drink. But main reason, why are we here? Well, first and foremost, it's a nice drive up here. It's nice if you're a car person. Nice views. But it's also a perfect spot to demonstrate and explain how to treat water on a much smaller scale. So join us as we take a step through a few different methods to filter and purify water. Roughly 99 billion and a bit fewer litres, because we don't need that much water today. But it will be a really useful insight into filtering water to make it safe to drink for your next adventure. Hi everyone. It's Ben from Trekitt, and I'm out here with Harry at the top of the Elan Valley today to discuss water filtering with you and just generally getting water when you're out and about in the outdoors. Every litre of water that you carry with you effectively adds a kilo to your pack, and that's not always ideal, especially if you're going to be out for multiple days. So instead of carrying literally the kitchen sink with you on your back, or large amounts of water, which isn't always the most practical or always the most comfortable, there is an alternative solution, and that is finding water, like natural water sources when you're out and about, much like this one down here, which is feeding into some of the reservoirs further down in the Elan Valley. While there is an abundant supply of water there, it's not necessarily as easy as just going and filling straight up, at least not if you're a people. People don't always have the ability to drink this sort of water without getting ill due to various factors inside the water, but we can fix that with a few different methods of filtering and purifying the water. It makes it safe to drink, and it also then means that you don't have to carry that water with you. So in this video we'll go through a few different methods, a few tried and true. Some are simple, some are a little bit more complicated to do, but they should all effectively mean that you will have safe drinking water that you can then drink, cook with, do whatever you want with. Now there are a few things that we will discuss over this video. First and foremost is the different types of water filtering and purification. And it's worth mentioning that filtering and purification are two different things. Sometimes they cross over depending on the method used, but essentially filtering is doing just that. It is filtering out bad things from the water, so bacteria, protozoa, sediment from the water as well, because not all water sources are going to be clean. So filtering is forcing the water through a porous filter. You normally have that with a combination with a pre-filter to get rid of most of the sediment so that you don't have any of those chunks and any of the big nasty bits floating in the water, because it's just not very nice to drink, and you also don't know what that sediment is. It could be from the river itself, it could be something that's fallen in, it could be something that's fallen out of an animal, you don't know. Purification is what then moves on after the filtering process, because not all filtering will remove bacteria, protozoa, but most filters won't remove virus. So purification kills off all of those bacteria and viral load in there, but it doesn't filter the water. So whilst you will filter the water and potentially leave virus and things in there, if you then also purify the water after that, or vice versa, you're then in a better state for water that is clean and drinkable. But purifying water alone also has some drawbacks, usually in terms of flavour. That by far and away is the worst tasting water that we've had so far. As I mentioned before, that sediment as well is something that you really have to consider, because I don't know about you, but I like my water without chunks in it. So removing that sediment from the water is something that is key just for an enjoyment point of view, because if you just purify the water, you're still going to have sediment in there, and that's not very nice to drink. Now there is one last category of things that you really don't want in your water that you're going to be drinking, and this is where it gets a little bit trickier depending on your circumstances and where you are. But that's heavy metals and other chemicals. The most common ones that you'll find in them are going to be things like arsenic, fluoride, lead, copper, that sort of thing, usually from sort of like mining tailings or industrial operations, but also from agricultural practices. You really don't want to be drinking those in your water. Now, unfortunately, none of the filters that we're discussing today on our small sort of scale in terms of individual use will filter out a lot of that stuff. It's more for sort of industrial scale and for home use that you will find filters that will filter that stuff out. So it is worth bearing in mind that in order to avoid things like that, best practice is to find water sources that are further away from agricultural offspill and industrial landscapes. So don't fill up next to a mining pond and expect that water to be free from those sort of contaminants. Something like we've got here, where we've got fast flowing water that's coming straight off the hills. Yes, there is a little bit of agriculture around, but it's mostly in the form of sheep poo. That's not really going to be as big of a concern given some of the methods that we'll factor in. It's more if you're in a more industrial landscape or somewhere that is more highly polluted. Just be conscious of your water choices. Try and find flowing water rather than stagnant, and also don't get water near industry. That's potentially where you would be carrying a little bit more water from home, but that's a sacrifice that you're going to have to make, because that water then is going to be more potable, it's going to be more drinkable. So the first and arguably easiest method, depending on what you're carrying, of making your water safe to drink is by boiling. So we've collected some water from the river that we're in now, and it's simply a case of boiling the water on Harry's handy wind burner here. A little bit of steam coming off the bottom because I use the cup to collect the water. Essentially, by boiling the water and keeping it on a rolling boil, you're going to kill off anything that's on the inside, that's in the water, that makes it unsafe to drink, in the sense of any bacteria, any protozoa, anything like that. You're going to kill it all off. It doesn't, however, filter any of that water. So you're still going to get some particulate in this. This water here is fairly free from it. I can't really see any nasty floaty bits or anything, but they are still going to be there, which is not as nice to drink. The other thing with boiling water, whilst it's very easy to do if you have a stove like this with you, you might not necessarily be carrying a stove. You also have to factor in, if you're out for multiple days, that when you're using a stove to boil your water off as well to make it safe to drink, you've got to factor in more fuel, you've got to factor in more gas with that, or whatever your fuel medium of choice is. Not necessarily the end of the world, but it does mean you'll be carrying more gas. You also, if you're not using this to make tea, coffee, or a dehydrated meal, have to wait for this to cool down, unless you particularly like drinking boiling water. So you have to factor in that this water is going to need time to cool down before you're able to drink it. But it is a very easy and available method to make sure that you have water that you can drink. Okay, so we had to film a few other shots while we left this to cool down, which is the other disadvantage of water that you have boiled to make safe. So we had to make sure it was cool enough so I could drink it, because I wasn't planning on drinking it as a cup of tea or coffee. Only thing to mention with this is there is a bit of particulate in the bottom, and the water is still slightly discoloured, but this water will be safe to drink. I'm just not planning on drinking a lot of it right now because I prefer the filtered stuff. I'm a little bit bougie like that. But let's give it a taste test and see. That, by far and away, is the worst tasting water that we've had so far. It's still perfectly drinkable. Like I could drink that entire thing if I needed to. I probably wouldn't drink too close to the bottom just because of that particulate that's still in the bottom. That's probably a 3 out of 10 in terms of flavour. It's still perfectly drinkable. There's nothing there that stands out as being particularly bad. It is just, flavour-wise, feels like I have just scooped it straight out of there and had a little drink. So the next method of making your water safe to drink is just a physical filter. So there are a few different types of filters. Some of them will do more or less in terms of what they filter, whether they filter out bacteria and protozoa, or whether they also do viruses and other things as well. We'll start off with a slightly more basic filtering option, which is just a strict filter. So this is an MSR Trail Shop. This is actually my own personal one. So the idea with this, or many other filters that we have from the likes of Platypus, Catadin, and others, is that it is a physical water filter that will filter out any of the bacteria and protozoa from the water, and also any particulate as well. Part of that is with the pre-filter on this particular unit, on the end of the tube here, that then goes into the water source. And with the Trail Shot, you have, excuse me, you have two options when it comes to how you access the clean water that comes out of it. You can either drink directly from the nozzle on top. If you choose to do that, you have to be a little bit closer to the water and you're drinking directly from it. Think a little bit like a hamster. Or you can use a clean source water bottle. So I've just got a Nalgene here that has only had clean water in it. I haven't dunked it in there or anything to cross-contaminate it, and you can fill up that water source with that. But essentially all you're doing with this is you're popping it in the water source and you're just squeezing until some of that clean water starts filtering its way through the filter. So it is a reliable and easy to use method that will work. You'll filter water. You won't want to use this for a large group of you because it will take a while to filter. You know, it's a couple of minutes to get a litre of water at this current rate. If you really want to go for it and you start squeezing with two hands, you can get it going a little bit quicker. Two-handed method always works. But essentially, this is filtering out clean, usable water. So I will filter a little bit into this bottle here, because whilst this does filter out the water more than boiling would, in the sense that you will get a little bit less flavour retention from the sauce. It is still going to be flavoured with the natural environment a little bit. This is again where picking your water source quite carefully is useful. So just got a little bit of water in there. I'm not going to spend the entire time to fill up. But this water, this filter, super simple to use. It's quite small, it's compact. Can't really tell what colour it is because I chose my orange Nalgene bottle rather than the clear one, which is probably a mistake. But let's see what it tastes like. It is completely clear and free from any particulate, which is really nice, makes me feel a little bit better about drinking it. It does still taste surprisingly earthy. You know, it's not something that you'd really want to drink large quantities of unless you get used to the taste. It doesn't taste like it's come from the tap. I'd probably give that a 5 out of 10. It's not terrible, but it's not great. But I know that water is safe to drink from where we are, and I can carry on drinking that. It might taint flavour of a few things, but as soon as you have a strong flavour source in there, like in a dehydrated meal or a cup of coffee or something, you won't notice it. So another type of physical filter that we potentially have access to is something like a Grail filter. So unlike the Trail Shot, the Grail uses an activated filter. Essentially there's charcoal in the filter on this guy. So this will also affect the flavour of the water, or at least in theory. This particular one is a little bit different to some of the others that you may see, especially for sale, because this one was one I got for doing the Fjärran Classic. It's also a slightly smaller unit than some of the others that they produce. That does mean that I can effectively filter slightly less water per use with this, but it is a little bit of a smaller overall carry. Because the thing with a filter like a Grail is that it is, if I get this guy out, relatively bulky for the amount of water that you can actually filter. But the payoff can be that you have an all-in-one solution, so it is both a water bottle and the filter. Filters this orange bit on the bottom here. So it means that you can filter as you go, and you've got it all carryable in a single unit, versus the Trail Shot filter that we just played with, that you can drink directly from, or you have to fill up another vessel. So overall, this solution, on balance of a filter and a separate water bottle, this is an all-in-one. But this, because of that activated filter on the bottom, should affect flavour. It does also mean that this purifying cartridge on the bottom, though, can't filter as much and for as long as a Trail Shot before you have to replace it. So this solution can be a little bit more expensive. But if you're in an environment where you don't want the water to have any sort of taste or taint to it, this filter is a good option. So using this guy might seem a little counterintuitive, but you actually fill up the outside of this, and there's a fill line on the outside. Once you've filled that up with water from your water source, you then press the filter down. So you're using some of your body weight, some natural leverage to press this down, and then the clear chamber here gets filled up with clean, potable, drinkable water. So we'll fill this guy up. It's important to pay attention to that fill line. I'm a little bit below it. Can get a little bit more in there. But you don't want to overfill it like I have now, so pour a little bit back out there, because the inner vessel takes less capacity, so you might end up spilling dirty water that's inside here over your drinking surface, which you don't want to do. That's the only other thing to mention is cross-contamination. So this hand right now that I've got here, I'm going to have to tuck this down here, is a little bit wet. So that water is dirty water. So I don't really want to be getting it near the lid up this end, so I'm going to hold the bottom of the filter, unscrew the lid here, and take that off, or leave it on slightly. As a little hack with the Grail filter, leave a quarter turn of the lid so it's still on, but it allows air to vent out so that you then have a nicer pressing surface. With this filter, you're then plunging filter down and pressing down. Ideally, I'm going to kneel for this, so I am going to kneel because then I get a little bit more body weight on it. And you're just pressing this filter down using it like a piston, and that's forcing it through the filter. So this is a very quick method. It's also very easy to do. So that's now pressed through to the top there. What that means is I can now unscrew this, and inside here, which we'll get a close-up of, I now have my drinking water, and the rest is sealed inside this vessel here. So I can now drink this and give you a taste test as well. And that's a really quick, easy process to do. And I can also seal that up, carry that water with me, and away to go. So you can fill up and restock on the go as when you need to. So I'm just going to have a little drink of this and give you a rating out of 10 for the flavour. Yeah, so totally different experience to the Trail Shot when it comes to flavour. The last one with the Trail Shot, the flavour, it did still feel quite earthy, a little bit peaty maybe. Definitely a bit more brackish. But this water now doesn't have any real taint or flavour to it. You couldn't really tell that this was filtered water. Like, there's no particulate in here either. It's just quite nice drinking water that I would happily drink as water, whereas the stuff from the trail shop with this particular water source, I would drink it if I needed to, but I'd probably be putting it into a tea or a coffee or something with some flavour to drink it. But this is like an 8 out of 10, 8, 9 out of 10. It's very drinkable. So next step up when it comes to water filtration is a filter and purifier in combination. So whilst you can filter water using something like a trail shot or a Grail, and then add chemical purification, to it afterwards, to remove any virus, norovirus, anything like that, anything you really don't want in your body, any of those nasties, making that a two-step process. You can use an all-in-one combination unit, something like MSR's Guardian, which is a purifying water filter. So this guy is a little bit more advanced than the other filters that we've had. The giveaway should be in terms of its physical size and stature there, but it was designed originally for the US military, so you know it's going to reliably work wherever you are in the world, because they needed a solution that was an all-in-one that was capable of delivering a faster rate of water filtration and flow, but also something that would remove any and all nasties from the water apart from those heavy metals. So it will get rid of bacteria, protozoa, virus and sediment, making most water in most regions drinkable without the need for adding any chemical purification afterwards. So this is a little bit more advanced. It does also mean it's a bit bigger, a bit bulkier, and also more costly than some of the other solutions. The other solutions are much more backpacker friendly in terms of both cost and size. This guy is a little bit bigger. It's still fairly lightweight considering what it's capable of, but it is a bigger overall unit. So one thing you may notice, again, much like the trail shot, is you do have an extendable tube so you can put that into your water source. This one does have a pre-filter on the end, which again gets rid of most of that particulate from it. Anything that gets through that mesh is then filtered out by the main filter in the body unit here. But this is designed to float on the water, which is why you've got this foam pad here face down. Might be a little bit more difficult with the way the stream is running here, but we'll still be able to filter water. Dirty water then comes up this tube into the main unit here, and it is a pump action. And to make life easier, MSR have put a filter thread on the bottom here. I've got the cap on to secure it at the moment, but this thread here is actually the same, wherever I put it, as the thread of the head of an Nalgene. So you can filter this just into water, and water will find its way out. But what you can actually do is, if you've got a Nalgene bottle, it will screw onto the end. You then have a completely contained unit, so you can press down on this and start filtering through and getting water pouring into your Nalgene, so you have drinkable water. I've got about 500 mils there in 5 or 6 strokes. I wasn't keeping count, might have been a few more than that. Anyone in the comments will probably tell me I'm way out in the number of strokes. But all of that water in there is now safe to drink, has been filtered and purified, so you can be sure that it is free from bacteria, protozoa and viral load. So that water is going to be nice and safe to drink. In terms of flavour and taste, there is still potentially going to be some taint from the environment, but I would expect that to be somewhat diminished because the physical filter is slightly better. So it still probably tastes a little bit better in this environment than the trail shot. But let's give it a taste and find out. Certainly smells clean, like water. Yeah, so there's no taint or real taste to that. Arguably, I'd say that's probably an 8 out of 10. The Grail filter just has the edge, but that is perfectly drinkable, perfectly clear. There's no sediment in that, and it's just a nice thing to drink. But this unit is a bit bulkier, a bit heavier to carry. This is more the sort of thing that you probably take on expedition, or if there are multiple of you that you need to filter water for, rather than an individual thing where you do something like a trail shot or the Grail filter. So the last option, and arguably one of the cheapest options for volume of water that's being purified, is some sort of chemical treatment. So something like this will purify water, but it will not filter the water. So in an ideal world, you want the water to be as clean and free of debris as possible. And then you can use something like Life Systems chlorine dioxide tablets. Yeah, these are the dioxide ones. We also do chlorine tablets to purify the water. So these guys will kill bacteria, virus, protozoa, all of the nasties that you want. But because it is chlorine, or chlorine dioxide in this case, you will have some taint and change of flavour to the water to a more chlorine taste, which isn't to everyone's liking. However, these are by far the smallest and lightest option because they are tablets. So they're just a little blister pack of tablets that you can pop into water, and you've got 30 here, so you can purify, got to get that right, purify up to 30 litres of water. So this does take a little while to act, but what you can do is essentially find water that you want to drink. In this case, this now becomes our water vessel that we're going to fill up directly from the water source. Please note we're filming this video last because up until now this has been our clean water bottle, but we're now using it to fill with water straight from the stream. So we can fill this up. Get a little bit more in there. So you've got water straight from there. I've tried to avoid as many particles and particulate as I can by picking a fast flowing stream that's going through some of the rock bed first, so hopefully there's not going to be too many chunks of things in there because obviously this doesn't filter any of that out. And then what you will then do, if I can find a nice flat surface, we're outside, nothing's flat, is you're then going to add a tablet per litre of water to this, and then you're going to seal up the container, give it a shake, and then leave it for a few minutes according to the instructions, which I probably should have read. You've got to wait at least 10 minutes before you can drink it. And if you've added more than a single tablet, you've got to wait half an hour. So if I was doing more water for more people, so say me and Harry both wanted a litre, we had a 2 litre vessel, I had 2 tabs, we'd have to wait half an hour. But for this, it's just a little blister tab that you pop in, and you're giving a shake to help dissolve that tablet. That will then start to break down. It's starting to break down now, so we can leave this for 10 minutes and come back to try it and give a taste test in a minute.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
Okay, so we've been clock watching, and it's been about 10 minutes. It has been 10 minutes, I'd like to point that out, since we popped the chlorine tablet in here. So it's completely dissolved now in here. There is a little bit of particulate floating around in here. So I'm not going to drink a huge amount of this, but I will give you a taste test to prove that it is drinkable, potable water. So I'm going to give it a sniff as well, because you'd assume there would be some kind of chlorine smell to it, and there is a little bit. It smells a little bit like a swimming pool, not quite as strong, because there's not as much chlorine in here as there would be in a swimming pool. I'd also not recommend drinking swimming pool water, because why would you? But let's give this a taste and find out. So it does in fact taste much as you would expect. There is a chlorine tang to it. Chlorine dioxide is less offensive on the palate than just chlorine tablets. Chlorine tablets will taste a bit stronger than this. This arguably is similar to the boiled water in its taste. You don't have the sort of brackish, vegetable-y flavour that you did just from the boiled water, but it's still probably about a 3 out of 10. Perfectly drinkable, but by choice I would use a physical filter, something like the Grail, to get some of that flavour out as well. So that should give you a little bit of a rundown of options when it comes to water filtering and purification. It's by no means an exhaustive list. There are other methods available. There are also other units available from us. Each of these methods has its own positives and negatives, whether that be overall cost, their ability to fly away in the wind, weight, pack size, amount filtered per minute in terms of how much water you need versus how much effort needs to be put into doing it, as well as the conditions that you're using them in. So there are options here that will vary from something as an emergency backup that you can carry in your pack and not really notice, right the way through to something that you might use on an expedition, or a method that you need to, in an emergency, if you already have a stove with you, that you can use. If you'd like to shop our full range, there will be a link on screen now, where there'll be a complete breakdown of all of the types of filters that we stock and a little bit more information about each of the individual filters that we have on our website. So in typical fashion, while we're talking about water today, it is now starting to rain, so we're going to wrap this video up and I'm going to go and sit in the car and be dry for a little bit. See you in the next one.